Eli Chilcon. That's this week's new product release at Blending Room, and this feature video will discuss where this came from, how I roasted it, how it tastes, and also maybe how you can brew this at home. Many of the coffees that I buy are from Falcon Speciality, and this is one. This was actually sourced through Matt Sealby, one of the buyers there, and it was going to be a Christmas coffee of ours, but I decided not to because the flavour profiles didn't actually promote that. If you're interested in information about Falcon, I've linked them down below. With the intro done, let's talk about the roast profiles. This washed Caturra from Peru was always going to be a very fruit-forward coffee. And to accentuate this, I wanted to make sure that the roast profile and the roast itself was hard and fast, or a short roast. So for me, that is somewhere close to 9 minutes. And why I say me is that every roaster has a particular skill set inside of roast times. That's heat application versus solubility. And 9 minutes is a pretty fast roast for me. 8.5 I could possibly do. I haven't quite learned exactly what I need to do on the lorrying to be able to roast faster still. And a quicker roast allows more energy into the beans and promotes more of those fruit characteristics should they be there in the coffee. And I believe that that's something that this particular coffee deserved. So I had a target roast time of 9 minutes, which you can see on the screen now that I actually achieved 9 minutes and 1 second for this particular batch. There was a development time of 1 minute and 32 seconds, and I referenced the temperature probe last week from where we take this data. There was a development time ratio of 17%. So this is a proportion of the roast that lots of very interesting and important chemistries happen. And we call this our development time, and we use percentages or ratios to tell us how much of the time of the roast we spent in this zone. To achieve this 9-minute roast, I used 240 degrees Celsius as my input temperature on our return probe. Lorrying then has a 20-second period of soaking. Now, what is soaking? Soaking is a part of the roast profile in the very, very early stages where a roaster may choose to put no or very little gas into the drum. The real reason behind this is to protect hot spots on a single wall drum and therefore reduce the risk of some adverse effects like tipping and scorching. In double wall drums, you don't necessarily need to do this, and similarly, on an air roaster, you don't really need to do this. However, Lorrying has locked in this soak period of about 20 seconds, and we can't force it to do anything else. Once that 20-second period is over, I've then put in 60% gas, 70% gas, and tapered up on a minute-by-minute basis through to every 30 seconds adding another 5%. I do this from that 20-second-ish period through to when the bean color changes from green to a very light yellow. And what I want to do here is ramp up the energy as we move into the Maillard section of the roast, where again, lots of very interesting chemistries happen. And I mark this at 160 degrees Celsius. I do that every single time. Yes, the Maillard phase could start at a different temperature, 150, 155. However, I use the same temperature marker point for every single bean that I roast, just to have some degree of consistency. Because how do you define yellow? Is it this yellow or that yellow? Is it pale or dark? Who knows? So I choose a very static point of 160 degrees Celsius. You'll see actually on the screen that this is marked as our Maillard phase. And the phase preceding that is our drying phase. So there's 3 phases of the roast that we talk about in the roasting community often: drying phase, Maillard phase, and our development phase. Each one of these phases are very important for the overall development of flavour inside of your cup, and I'll do a deeper talk about that at some point in the future. With reference to the curve shape, I'm pretty happy with this. It's got a nice progression of heat over time, and looking at the rate of rise curve, there is this ever declining slope that I tend to use, and I have done for over a decade from the Probat and now onto the lorrying. There is a particular area of the roast that I need to somewhat mitigate, and that is what we would describe as a crash. A crash is a thermal event when water vapor will escape from the beans and cool the environment, thus bringing down the progression of the roast quite drastically. And we can see this happening at this phase inside of the roast. Now, when I was on the ProBat, there were certain tricks that I could use in order to encourage a continuation of the progression of temperature without that crash happening. However, I've not yet been able to transfer that mantra or methodology into the Loring roaster. And because coffee's super expensive, it's not something that I just want to do on the fly. So now what I'm trying to do is work on earlier phases inside of the roast to make sure that the thermal environment is such that it doesn't promote such a hard crash. That will then give me time to come up with a method to get around this particular event. I've continued to use the pyramid heat application, as you can see on the screen now. This was tapering up and then tapering down the heat throughout time, arriving at an end temperature of 213 degrees Celsius, which is a temperature I feel very comfortable at, and it derives a roast color that again I'm very comfortable at, certainly when I'm designing roast profiles that are going to lean very heavily into brewed coffee versus espresso. So talking about brewing, let's have a taste. So once again, I've got a batch filter brew. I really enjoy drinking filter coffee. It's something that I do every single day, so it gives me a much more controlled environment to be able to taste. Yes, I could do a cupping, but this is more applicable for how you drink this coffee at home. So digging our nose in, you'll smell this brown sugar, sweet brown sugar characteristic. There's also a little whiff of tropical fruit as well. We've put mango on the bag, and I think there's some of that inside of this cup, almost a papaya as well. So let's have a taste. Okay, so that tropical fruit comes right at you. There's a huge amount of sweetness in there. There's not as much acidity in there as I thought that there would be from a washed Caturra grown at high altitude from Peru, an origin that is synonymous with a very bright, effervescent, almost purple-like fruit sweetness, which I think is really fantastic for the cup profile because it allows much more of the sweetness to come through. You're not embattled with acidity as well as the fruity sweetness. And to that end, that mango, that ripe tropical fruit, sits really well with this cola and brown sugar syrupiness with this wonderful toffee-like finish. So how would I brew it? Well, I think this would work beautifully as a filter coffee, and that's where I'd have a very, very strong preference for you brewing this at home. The filter coffee would allow, through its wonderful dilution, lots of these interesting flavor characteristics to be shown to you in the cup. If you brew it as a cafetiere, yes, it would work. You would bring up that toffee and brown sugar quality, and you'd increase the amount of texture that you have in the cup, and that might be your preference as a home brewer. I would flirt with this as an espresso. There is some degree of controlled acidity in it, as I've described before, but it is a very light roast, so you do have acidity. So if you are going to attempt to have this as an espresso-based brew, please try a more diluted brew ratio, such as 1 to 2.5. You could even be daring and go 1 to 3. At that point, the dilution will allow these characters to come through, and you will smooth out the present acidity within the cup. Beyond that, AeroPress, absolutely. Clever Dripper, yes. Kalita Wave, indeed. Any other brew method, it would absolutely work. I might avoid this as a stovetop for no particular reason other than I don't really like a stovetop brew. And on that revelation, that was Eli Chilcon, a washed Caturra from Peru, and the new release at Blending Room this week. If you're interested in purchasing a bag, it is available on the internet. It will be with me at Beverley Market on Saturday, and you can visit us between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday at the roastery. As usual, I hope this video has been insightful. If you've got any questions, do put them in the comments below. And until next time, enjoy your coffee.